Hello, welcome to Monday Mindset. I am Erin Hart, and this is our time each week to get you in the right frame of mind to be able to win that mental game of weight loss with your sugar and flour free lifestyle. So, as I said, I'm Erin Hart. I'm the owner and founder of Erin Hart Health Coaching, and I empower women to get off of the dieting roller coaster and lose weight for the last time with a sugar and flour free lifestyle so that you can find peace with your food and your body and find the confidence to chase your dreams and do what you're really meant to do in this life. So today we are going to be talking about conquering your cravings. So a lot of us have the goal of finding peace with our food, and sometimes if you're a person that experiences food addiction or you experience food obsession, you feel out of control around food, you overeat. Sometimes it can be those cravings and urges can just be overpowering, and you can feel kind of powerless against them, right? Like you have to act on them. But what I want to present to you today is that no, you actually have a choice in that moment and you have control. And I want to teach you some tools and tricks that can help you with overcoming and conquering those big urges and cravings when they come up. So to talk about this, I think it's important to talk about our brain. The way our brain is designed it's so fascinating and amazing. And I'm not an expert at all. I'm a registered nurse, but I am not a neuroscientist or anything. But I have learned so much about the brain through this process of transformation myself and through a lot of studying courses I've taken. And I think it's really interesting how our brain is always trying to protect us and to keep us alive. And we have different parts of our brain. We have the higher portion of our brain that controls our cognitive thinking, and it controls our movement. And then this lower portion of our brain down here, physiologically, that controls the survival. It's kind of the survival brain, the caveman brain, the lizard brain, whatever you want to call it. But it's just that instinctual brain where those instincts kick in and those strong urges and cravings come from to help to keep us alive and reproduce and, like to and to go forward as a human race. So it's really interesting when it comes to overcoming our negative behaviors around food and overcoming food addiction, and it can really be very useful to understand, but to better understand our brain and what's happening when we are having those strong urges and cravings. That there's nothing wrong with you if you're having strong urges to eat sugar or flour, or you're having strong urges to eat large amounts of food. That's just your brain trying to keep you alive and trying to make sure you don't starve. And what we need to learn to do is to boss our brain. That our brain, it's trying to help us, but we need to just be aware of some of the things that it's doing to try to help us and use that higher part of our brain, which is our highest self. It's who we really are. It's our identity. It's our cognitive thinking, and our ability to move and to act comes from up here. So the good news is that higher part of our brain is stronger than the instinctual part of our brain. And we can overcome those strong urges and cravings. So the first step is to just recognize what's happening. When you're having a really strong urge or craving to eat off of your plan, or to do a behavior that's not healthy, like maybe cope with life in a way and with trying to use food instead, that can sorry, I'm like totally mumbling over all my words today. I have mommy brain a little bit. But anyway, so when you're having a really strong urge or craving, it's just important for us to recognize that it's just neurological junk that's happening. There's no actual emergency. there's no actual problem, right? If you are eating the meal plan that we teach here, that is, it's has a ton of healthy real food. You have an abundance of healthy real food from every food group. You eat meals throughout the day in weighed and measured quantities that are free from sugar and flour. You have enough food. You are good to go. So we have to boss our brain and just let our brain know it's okay. Like, we have everything that we need. When we're having those strong urges and cravings, first step is to just, calm our brain down a little bit and just recognize it for what it is those urges and cravings are just neurological junk. There's no actual emergency. Our bodies have everything that they need. And while we are on a calorie restricted diet to be able to drop weight and to lose fat, decrease our body fat percentage into a healthy range so that we don't have diet related diseases, while we are restricting in that way, it is we still have all that we need. And so just recognizing that and looking at that for what looking at those urges and cravings for what they are, as just neurological junk. There is no actual emergency. There is, everything is okay. We are going to be fine, and we have everything that we need. Our food is abundant and healthy, and it's part of the plan for us to be hungry sometimes. So look forward to those strong urges and cravings and be curious with them when they come. When you notice a really strong urge and craving come, don't push it away or push it, or try to suppress it in any way. Just say like, oh, okay, here's one of those urges and cravings from my lower brain, and just recognize that that's what it is. There's nothing wrong with you for having an urge and a craving. It's just part of your brain trying to protect you and to keep you alive. But there is no actual emergency. You're fine. So we need to first just recognize what they are, right? And then secondly, we just don't want to react to them. We don't want to become distressed by the urges and cravings when they come. We don't want to feel bad about it. We don't want to have guilt for having urges and cravings or shame. We don't want to beat ourselves up for having those thoughts pop into our mind, because this is just part of our brain trying to protect us. And just know that you're not always going to have all of these food thoughts and urges and cravings coming up all of the time. What you're doing by not acting on them is teaching your brain that it can settle down, that everything's fine. It's kind of like a 2-year-old. I have a little 3-year-old. We'll use her as an example, right? If she's throwing a fit and she is just, she wants something and she's throwing a fit about it, if I give in to her and give her the thing that she wants, she's going to know that that works and she's going to push that boundary again and again and again. And so she's going to throw more and more fits, right? So what I want to do with my daughter, right, is to hold a strong boundary with her and set those strong boundaries with her, that no means no, and just help her to understand that. And then what we find as parents, right, is that when we have those strong boundaries and we don't give in intermittently, the kids will get the idea, right? And they stop asking, or they stop throwing fits. And our brains are like 2 and 3-year-olds, right? Our brains are like that. It's testing your boundaries. And so when you're having those strong urges and cravings in the moment, you need to ask yourself, or you need to just send a clear message to your brain that, this is a boundary that I have with food. In the program that we teach, we talk about setting clear, unambiguous boundaries with food. For example, not eating sugar, not eating flour, and like a line in the sand that you just don't cross, like a smoker who doesn't smoke anymore. And it's a clear boundary that you just don't cross anymore. The same with quantities, right? We weigh and measure our food and eat our meals at meal times. And those are food boundaries that help us to have less urges and cravings. Because when we can send a consistent message to our brain and we have the urges and cravings to eat those foods or to eat off of our plan, something that's not on our plan, if we're intermittently giving in to those urges and cravings and crossing those boundaries over and over again, our brain is just going to hound us, and it's going to have more and more food thoughts, more and more food chatter, more and more cravings and urges, and it's going to feel a lot harder. But when we set clear boundaries with ourselves and we don't cross them, and up front we decide that that's what our boundary is now, and we stop giving in to those urges and cravings, it's amazing what happens. We can really start to experience freedom from cravings, where your brain starts to get the idea, right? Like you consistently are not giving in to those strong urges and cravings, and so your brain will settle down and it's going to stop asking you and hounding you and trying to negotiate with you. So it's just a way to really find peace with your food and freedom from cravings by having those clear and unambiguous boundaries that you just don't cross. But it is, sometimes we still do have cravings and food thoughts, and they can still pop up, even when you're in maintenance at times, your brain can kind of remember some of those old coping mechanisms and want to go back to those. But it's just all about sending a clear message to your brain and not intermittently reinforcing the cravings by giving in to them. So your only job in those moments when you're having a really strong urge and a craving, when you notice that happening in the moment, your only job is to not act on the urge. Your only job in that moment, when you notice that your brain is telling you to eat off of your plan, your only job is to not act on it. And if you can do that over and over again, every time you do that, you're building mental strength and fortitude. You're creating new neurological grooves in your brain, and you're creating new pathways for your brain to go, so it doesn't always go to the food. And we find different ways to reward ourselves in that moment. The difficulty with our society is that for so long, we have rewarded our children and ourselves with food. Food is a reward in our society. It is a reward if you're good. It's a reward if you feel bad to help you to feel better, right? It's something that we've trained ourselves to do, is to, when we want to feel better, we go to food. When we want to celebrate something, we go to food. When we want to grieve, we go to food. So what we need to do is replace the reward. So when you are having a big urge and a craving, just recognize that food does not solve any problem except for true physiological hunger. Food is not going to solve anything. So we need to replace the reward and find a different way to care for ourselves emotionally, and a different way to celebrate our wins in life. We need to find a different way to connect with people, right? That doesn't involve food. So we can still enjoy our food and love the food that we eat. And I think that that's really important to do, that when you're eating your food, you love it, you enjoy it, you savor it, and it's something you love, but you don't want to be thinking about food in between your meals. You don't want to have that food obsession and always be thinking about food, right? You have so much more to do in life than to be so hyper focused on your food and your weight. So we're trying to replace the reward by finding different strategies to care for ourselves that doesn't involve food. So I want to give you some tips on how to do that today. So for me, one of the hardest things, and many of you know my story, that I was 284 pounds and I was a binge eater, and I really struggled with that, right? I always used food for every big emotion that I was feeling to just fill a void, to help me to feel better, to just give me that little boost throughout the day. But it was really an unhealthy relationship with food. And so the hardest part for me when I started the sugar and flour-free lifestyle was learning how to replace the reward. Like if I didn't have food to do that, what was left, right? You can't just leave an empty void in your life and in your heart. You need to fill that with something else that really does truly meet the need that you're having. So a couple of tips, like when you're having a really big emotion, try to name the emotion that you're having, and to talk about the sensations that you're having in your body. What sensation is it in your body that you're feeling? Is it anxiety? And then try to name the emotion that goes along with it. Is it anxiety? Is it fear? Is it loneliness? Is it boredom? Is it anger? Is it sadness? What emotion are you having? If you struggle with emotional eating, that can be something that really triggers cravings and urges. So try to identify and name the emotion, and then look for a way to directly address the need that goes along with that emotion. So if you are angry, for example, something that I found really helps me when I'm angry, instead of turning to food, would be to just go for a walk around the block and blow off some steam, right? Or call a friend, or write in my journal just all the angry things that I would never say to anyone, right? So finding a healthy way to replace the food in that scenario. If you're bored, get out of the house, go run an errand. If you're sad, like truly just allowing yourself to feel the emotion and cry. So facing your problems head on instead of avoiding them by using food. Because when you use food, the problem is still there. But if you can address the problem head on, you're in a much better place to be able to address it and get through it quicker, right? So like when we actually allow ourselves to feel angry, to feel sad, to feel the emotion, it goes away faster. It goes away faster, and it's a healthier way to cope with it. Talking with people, writing in your journal. There are so many different strategies. And in the PDF workbook, under the emotional eating PDF, you can find a lot more ideas on how to go about that. So that's the first thing, is we need to really just replace the reward. Another thing, like if you're having a really strong urge and a craving, is distraction. So this is just a method, is that the more we think about something, the more likely we are to act on that thing. So what we want to do is, when we're having a really strong urge or craving, in that moment, is to redirect your mind immediately to something else. If you're having a food thought or an urge to eat off of your plan, you just immediately redirect to something else. And distraction is a really powerful tool in overcoming and conquering cravings. So the more you can not think about it, like if you're thinking about it, if you're watching shows, right, like on the food channel, and you're like, have the visual cues in your mind all the time, and you're like, oh my gosh, that looks so good, that looks so good. And then you start to have all these food thoughts about it. Like it uses up a lot of willpower. Or when you have food on the countertop and you have the visual cue there, and every time you walk past it, you have to use willpower to not act on it. So controlling your environment by eliminating triggers, by not watching the food channel, not watching food shows, not having things on the counter where you can see them. And then just really trying to control what you're allowing to go into your mind by eliminating triggers. And then when the food thoughts do come in to eat off plan, just immediately redirecting your mind to something else, and trying not to think about it and not dwell on those food thoughts. Another strategy that you can use is that I think is kind of interesting. This is from the book Chatter, and it's really interesting. So if you talk to yourself in the third person, it can really help you to get through these cravings and urges. So for example, if you're having a food thought to eat not my food, you can say, okay, does Erin really need that? You know, what does Erin need to do to achieve her health goals? So when we talk in third person, it's so interesting. In the book Chatter, it explains that your brain is going to distance itself, and your brain doesn't go offline when giving someone else advice. You know, but a lot of times when we have a strong urge or craving, it feels so overpowering, like we can't not give into it. But if you can, and that's the lower part of your brain, that's the survival caveman part of your brain kicking in. And those urges and cravings feel so strong, right? So one way to get out of that is to talk to yourself in the third person. That uses the higher part of your brain, that where you have agency, where you have control, where you control your movement. And so you can use that higher part of your brain to overcome those strong urges and cravings by using the third person. So does Erin really need that? Does, what is that going to do? Is that going to help Erin get to her health goals? Or, trying to use it in that way. So instead of saying like, what do I need right now? If you're having a really big emotion or feeling, saying, okay, well, what does Erin need? And I know that can sound kind of funny, but it just provides space in between the urge and the action. And it helps you to use that higher part of your brain to make a better decision. So there's so many different strategies for overcoming cravings that we're going to talk about in our group coaching call this week. And I will post those in our VIP Facebook group for those of you who are my clients. But I hope that those tips that I gave you today are helpful, and that you can just start to know that you really do have control. That just because you're having a strong urge or a craving, it doesn't mean that you have to give into it. You have a choice in that moment, and every choice that you make changes the future. So whether you give into those cravings or whether you choose to not give into those cravings, it's going to create a different result in your life. So finding and practicing these strategies, you're not going to be perfect at it all the time. You're probably going to make some mistakes and give into your urges and cravings sometimes. But the more and more that you say no to your brain, that lower portion of your brain that wants you to eat off of your plan, the stronger you're going to become, and the easier it's going to get, and the less food thoughts and food chatter you're going to have. So I hope that you guys have a great week, and I'm excited to talk to you this week. So I will see you soon. Take care. Bye.